The Hogsty is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsty.com.
The Hogsty presents It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and Rich Rogers. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry.
Welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogsty Network, the show where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports industrial media complex. We've got Alex sitting in the Rich chair today as Rich glows for some schools out summer beach fun. So, Alex, welcome to the gauntlet.
Hey, good to be back on with you guys.
And Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing fine. I'm kind of jealous of Rich because remember last show he told us he was going on tour, you know, because he sent us off the air. He sent us his vacation schedule, and it's like packed. You know, I'm very jealous. So Rich is out there gallivanting around the country right now.
Nice.
So,
I wish I was gallivanting.
I know. I just gallivanted from my garage to my seat to get this show done. That's about it.
Yeah, we're gonna need a GoFundMe campaign for a vacation for Steve.
I
think
more of a corporate retreat for all the Hogsty Network people to, go somewhere.
See, that's what we need, and we need you guys to fund it for us because we don't really want to pay for it,
right?
But we want to do it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna call it the Hogsty Leadership Retreat, and we're gonna have a GoFundMe started. And if you guys, you're not gonna get anything out of it, and we don't have anything to give you other than our undying gratitude and thanks.
Trust funds and keg stands.
Yeah, there we go.
But see, I can't do keg stands unless it's got Sunkist in it.
You do a trust fund stand.
All right. Well, we got a lot to chew on today, and we are going to honor our guest Alex by having him intro our first topic. He's our only DMV local here with Rich out, and he's going to give us a little bit of look in are the Orioles going to fly from Baltimore?
Yeah, okay, so I heard about this story over the weekend. I was driving around and listening to the sports radio station, and Thom Loverro was talking about some rumors he heard that the Orioles are unhappy with a lot of the situation in Baltimore. He thinks it's an empty threat, but he thinks that someday they could potentially consider leaving Charm City. Now, to give some backstory, it all has to do with the MASN TV dispute. And apparently, you guys have never heard of this. I guess it's just a local story.
MASN being the Mid-Atlantic Sports Network, correct?
Yes, MASN is the TV network for both the Orioles and the Nationals. And when DC got their team, Peter Angelos kind of forced MLB to give him the TV rights to the Washington Nationals as well as the Orioles on his network. The Nationals get a minority share of the TV network. I think it started out like 10%, and now it's at 15%. They'll eventually get up to 30% or something like that. They never get a majority, but they get a large percentage of the network. And they also have to agree to terms with the network in terms of how much money the Nationals' TV rights are every couple of years. A few years ago, the Nationals said they wanted $100 million. Not the most expensive, but up there, and they're a top 10 market. It made sense, kind of on par with like the Rangers or some of the other bigger market teams. And the Orioles were offering like a quarter of that or a third of that. And it's been litigation ever since, with the Nationals kind of stuck in this really low-end contract for their market size. Apparently, it's going to go to arbitration again in front of Major League Baseball. And it looks like MLB is going to kind of side with the Nationals on all this. They think the Nationals deserve more money. The O's front office is really unhappy. And Loverro speculates that this could be one of two things. One, the Orioles will eventually use this as a reason to leave. Or more likely, two, this is Major League Baseball trying to force the Orioles ownership to sell the team. Because, they're kind of one of those cheapskate ownership groups anyway that Major League Baseball wants to get rid of. And it's a wild kind of story. It's a huge back and forth thing between the whole, the DC-Baltimore rivalry, as people like to talk about.
it's really
one
a
of those
one-sided
little
rivalry.
sub-stories there, you know?
It's really if you're from Baltimore, you have to hate DC, and if you're from DC, you don't care one way or another
Right.
about Baltimore,
Well,
except
but
for
we
your
like to
crab
make fun
cakes.
of them. We like to make fun of them. That's what it is.
Okay, let me shed some light on it. And first of all, Thom Loverro is with the Washington Times, right? And
He's
on
with the Times,
106.7.
and he's been a on-air radio personality for...
Right.
He's a DC institution at this point.
Okay. Here's what I found interesting about it, because Alex brought this story to us, and I find it interesting because the reason why all this is happening is that Major League Baseball establishes basically home territories for all their teams.
Right.
And so if you're the Milwaukee Brewers, which is my favorite team to pick on this show, you have a home territory that includes Milwaukee and some outside, some limits outside of the city of Milwaukee. And so they don't want you to interfere with the Cubs and the White Sox.
Or the Twins,
or the Twins or somebody else. And so the reason why this problem exists is that the Baltimore Orioles' home territory after the Senators left in the 60s?
60s, yeah.
Yeah. The Washington, D.C. became the Orioles' home territory. And so in order to give the Orioles an incentive to not fight over the Nationals coming, because Peter Angelos hated the idea for years, and
he stopped it for a good 20 years.
Yeah, he was part of the problem, part of the reason why DC didn't have a baseball team, and so part of the way they got him out of this is to give him the Nationals TV rights, and that's very fascinating because in today's modern baseball world and basketball world too, the local TV rights are everything.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason why the Dodgers have a ton of money isn't just because their owners, is attached to something called Guggenheim. It's because they have a ridiculous media contract with Time Warner in LA. And that's a whole nother topic, a whole nother show. Point is, that's why it's such a rich team. Why are the Yankees so rich? Not because the Steinbrenner family is George Soros, in terms of money. It's because that was a terrible example.
But we get it. They're a very wealthy family, but...
but the reason is the Yes Network.
Yeah, which covers half the East Coast.
Right. That's why the Yankees have so much money. And so I think it's fascinating, and I think the Nationals are getting screwed. I would assume that there's probably an upper limit date-wise on how long the Orioles can hold their rights.
No, I think the contract was done indefinitely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a royal, catering to Peter Angelos' whims kind of deal.
And why would Peter Angelos ever want to give the Nationals any money other than the minimum that he has to?
Right. And he's literally raking in probably, half his roster salary from that TV deal from the other team.
It's fascinating, and I guess it was the only way to get the Nationals into D.C. because the city of Baltimore, for those of you who are somewhere else in the country and have never left your hometown, Baltimore is, 30 miles from D.C., basically.
Right.
As the crow flies. So a very interesting story.
And I think it's interesting that the idea that they would use this as a way to force Angelos out, because other owners don't like Angelos. He is, for local people, he is the Dan Snyder of,
he's a penny-pinching cheapskate.
Yeah. Well, okay, a little different than Snyder, who's just irresponsible, but
he was actually pretty, his early reign, he spent a ton of money.
Yeah,
he was actually known as being super extravagant. Then that didn't work, and then he went from Schneider to the Cincinnati Bengals pretty quick.
What's the name again, Chris?
Snyder.
We're going to go through this week after week after week until you can get that guy's name right.
It's his Kurt.
Yeah.
This is the guy who talks about Zeitgeist at least once a month, and he can't pronounce Snyder.
Yeah.
I find it
It's intentional.
But if you like that kind of story, and Steve, I'm shocked you hadn't heard about it till tonight, this whole thing, because I think that would be the kind of litigation inside sports story that would be right up your alley. You should really.
It is. It's something that we'll have to look into more, and we'll definitely track it later on the show as the lawsuit progresses. Just straight off the top of my head, it sounds like the Nationals don't have much of a case except for just a basic equity argument, perhaps.
I think that's what it is. The fact that this was supposed to be agreed to 2 years ago, and it's all supposed to be done outside of the courts, like everything in sports is these days.
Yeah.
And there was a ruling, and then Baltimore protested it for 2 more years. It's just kind of, that's where it kind of annoys me the most, is you lost the case. They came up with a reasonable price figure. I can't remember what it was, but it was somewhere in between the two, ballparks of, hey, you guys want
somewhere
this
between
much?
130.
Yeah, somewhere in there. It's like 60. Something reasonable, and they still balked.
And just as an aside, the reason for those of you who are uninformed about legal proceedings, the reason why arbitration exists and the reason why entities like Major League Baseball love arbitration is that juries tend to not like billionaires.
Sure.
Juries tend to not like major, massive corporations and people with lots of money. And so if you're a big, faceless corporation or you're a guy like Peter Angelos, you sort of want to get away from a jury and in front of a professional. And that's why these arbitration cases exist. And that's why, that's why football makes football players arbitrate, because you don't want to get a famous football player in front of a jury facing down a billionaire.
Right.
That's not going to go well for the billionaire. So that's an aside.
I don't think Angelos has much social capital in Baltimore.
No.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
Other than the fact that he was apparently very well liked before he bought the team.
And then it all went to hell.
Yeah.
Because the Orioles haven't won in, forever. How long has it been?
What was it, 86? Am I right?
Cal Ripken was a rookie.
Yeah. It might have
Can I give an unpopular hot take?
Sure.
Cal Ripken is overrated. Cal Ripken's...
I think Cal you, sir.
I know. I told you it was going to be an unpopular take. I think Cal, if you look at his numbers and stuff, yeah, he's a good player. But, I mean, Cal Ripken's mystique lies in the streak more than anything else. I don't think if he hadn't played 8,000 games in a row or whatever the number is, you're talking about Cal Ripken and the vaunted, other, baseball players. He's not Derek Jeter.
He's a compiler that played a long time.
Right, he's a compiler, played a long time. So, and that we even sold to the city of Baltimore. And the other thing is, why is Baltimore called Charm City? But, I mean, when it's so not charming, but that's a whole other discussion for another day as well.
All right.
Google that.
Go ahead. I'm not here to defend Baltimore. So let's move on to our next topic, which we're going to look, we sort of a regular feature here is, checking in on the athletes and sports figures in the courtroom and in this case, well, not yet, I guess, but the police blotter type of thing. And that brings us to our man. Now, I'm going to have Steve say his name because Jameis? What's his name?
Jameis Winston.
Jameson Winston?
Say it with us. All together. Jameis Winston.
Jameson Irish whiskey.
Yeah, that's right. That's where my head goes for sure. Who was suspended for 3 games for violating some policy of the NFL. Steve, illuminate us.
Okay. Jameis Winston is a big dummy. Okay, we all know he has a history of problems. The most serious of which was a rape charge at Florida State that got dropped before it was charged. It was an investigation that some allege was bungled in no small part because it was involving a Florida State hero. So there's that. He had that. He had the shoplifting case again at Florida State where he walked out of a grocery store with crab legs. He had another incident where he was screaming a vulgar saying I
think we all kind of remember what he was saying.
Yeah. We don't want to say it because we don't want to get busted by the censors, the iTunes censors. But anyway, he got in trouble for that. And this latest thing is from 2016, and an Uber driver alleged that Winston groped her, for lack of a better term. And so there's that. Now, he hasn't been charged with this. But the NFL's conduct policy does not require a criminal conviction in order for punishment to be delved out, hence the 3 games, in spite of a lack of conviction. Now, Winston has just came out on Thursday of last week, which is today for us and last week for you listening to this, and apologized in a sense to this woman. He didn't go completely all the way, but he apologized. But here's the policy. The NFL has a personal conduct policy in which in relevant part says that if there is a sexual assault involving physical force or committed against someone incapable of giving consent, which may or may not be the case. There was a sexual assault. We don't know exactly what happened in the Uber.
Right.
We don't know if someone incapable of giving consent. I would assume she was capable of giving consent because she was driving a car. We don't really know. But If that happens, the first offense will subject the offender to a baseline suspension of 6 games. Okay, well, James got 3. So why, you ask? The reason is that the punishment, the policy allows the punishment to be moved up or down given the presence of aggravating or mitigating factors. In this case, if Winston got hit with a 3 game as opposed to the 6, you have to assume what happened here is this was probably a drunken grope and that was it, as opposed to something more serious when he was actually trying to complete the act with him or something like that. Alex.
See, okay, so here's what I don't understand, and you're the lawyer, so I'm going to ask you to clarify this. When I read baseline suspension of 6 games, and then the next sentence is the presence of a possible aggravating factor may warrant a longer suspension, period. How does he then get bumped down to 3? Because there's nothing
because
in there that I saw that said, okay, you can bump it down for this.
Well, you missed the clause that says that. Because what it literally says is, will subject the offender to a baseline suspension without pay of 6 games, comma, with consideration given to any aggravating or mitigating factors, period. And then the next sentence is the presence of possible aggravating factors may warrant a longer suspension. And it gives a list of what possible aggravating...
Right, but that doesn't tell you what would... It says may warrant a longer. It doesn't say what may warrant a shorter suspension.
Well, it says with consideration given to mitigating factors, and so it's a little vague on what a mitigating factor is, and so what it's leaving it up to the NFL to determine what really is mitigating. But that's the part that allows the NFL to lower the suspension is the mitigating factors clause in the first sentence.
If you say something's a baseline, that means you can't go under a baseline.
No, that's not what it means. I mean, what it means in this case is that this is the starting point, and then it's going to go up or down based on whether there is a mitigating factor or whether there's aggravating factors. And my guess is that they are specifically listing the aggravating factors because these things always get litigated.
Right.
And if you're going to increase the suspension, you want to have specifics as to how that can happen, because if you don't, then you're leaving things open to jury interpretation or arbitrary interpretations, and then you have problems.
Okay.
So they're saying
I got you now.
that's what it is.
So
again, my guess is that the facts here is probably that he was drunk and he grabbed somebody, the driver, in the wrong place, and she justifiably got upset, and that's probably what this is. That would be my guess.
Right.
Chris, you look perplexed.
No, I just have 2 main points about this. One, probably fairly predictable for longtime listeners. Josh Brown, 1 game, various women abusers, domestic abusers, sexual assaults, 3 games, 4 games. I guess
right.
You get caught with weed a couple times, year suspension. So,
well, you see, you're mixing and matching.
I know I am, but it's still ridiculous. It's still ridiculous. Okay. I know you can argue me on the specifics, but it's absolutely insane.
You're making I understand you're making a point about it. The legal answer to that is it's a whole other policy that mandates various stages of the drug, mandates a drug program, and you get put in various stages depending on how many times you failed, and eventually you're going to get up to a year suspension. That's not where it starts off with, but
no, yes, I know that you don't go to one puff to a year suspension. I realize that, but we have to deal with serial offender. Not the only one, Jameis Winston or whatever his name is, and Martavius Bryant. See, I get my fellow hopheads names right. Is out for a year, so I just think there's something crazy about that. So whatever.
I mean, Martavius has failed many drug tests to get to the point where he is suspended for a year. It's not one puff and you're out.
No, I realize. I acknowledge that.
We definitely also have a pattern of behavior in Winston's case, and
yes,
I'm sorry. I've been drunk 1,000 times. I'm
guessing you've never groped an Uber driver.
No,
right?
I've never groped an Uber driver. It's not hard to just not grope people inappropriately. I don't care how drunk you are. And I don't remember I was drunk defense, that's a lie.
Of course it is. And being drunk is not a legal defense to an assault charge either, incidentally. I mean, the larger issue here, I mean, Chris, you sort of touched on it. The larger issue here to me is This is another case of the NFL punishing a player without a conviction, and I know a lot of people have a problem with that, but the simple fact of the matter is a lot of times convictions don't stand up, or you don't get convicted because of procedural things, because of evidentiary issues, and there's a much higher standard in a criminal court that doesn't necessarily have to apply to the NFL. And that standard is there for a reason, but a lot of the procedural thing, a lot of times cases get thrown out for procedural and rights violations, and that's just not really relevant to did he do it. And the NFL standard, honestly, is did he do it. Forget all the evidentiary things, forget procedure, did he do it? And that's what the NFL cares about, and they care about that because it's protecting the shield. They don't care if the cops violated your rights. They care about is this dumb NFL player is groping an Uber driver. And I've said this, I think, to Alex before. The truth of the matter is, and from my experience in prosecuting cases for a little bit, a short period of time, 99% of the people did it. Okay, not 99% of the people aren't guilty, but they all did it. Yeah, and that's just, I'm sorry to tell you guys that, but that's just the truth, and that's really what the NFL cares about.
The other, sort of putting away some of that, which I generally agree with your take on there. The other thing, just to quickly look at in terms of the finances of managing a team, one thing I know about the Buccaneers is they are very thankful that there is a rookie wage scale, because the reality is they made such a colossal mistake. And I think number 1 overall, right? Drafting this guy number 1 overall. It's already going to do a lot of damage. There's so many ways for the number 1 pick when it's a quarterback to be a bust without the guy being a dunce. Right. And he was already trending that way, by the way. He looked like a Robert Griffin III copycat, just in terms of how much he was hated in the locker room, his leadership abilities. I mean, it was a joke. So you take his off the field stuff, he was trending towards bust anyway. You add this, and it's going to put that franchise back. Not like the salary cap bust it would have been in the pre-rookie wage scale days, but what a colossal mistake in team management and team finances taking this guy number 1. And all this stuff was there. Maybe he didn't grope an Uber driver, but every single other thing on the rap sheet was there.
There were a lot of red flags on this guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
to start with the rape allegation.
Right.
Because briefly, the rape case was, this woman said that he and another couple Florida State players were in an apartment, somebody's apartment, and he just flat out raped her.
Right.
That was the case, and it, again, for various reasons, he didn't get charged. But that's not just like I'm drunk and I grabbed a woman in the wrong spot. It was, honest to God, she's going to be raped.
It's
very, very
literally
serious
the
charge.
second worst thing you can do before you kill somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not something to joke about at all, obviously.
I mean, and the difference between sexual assault and rape in most states is that rape is insertion, and sexual assault is less than that. That's the difference, in most jurisdictions.
A pretty clear line.
Yeah, right. I mean, in terms of what Chris is saying, I mean, yes, they're thankful. Is it going to be a bust? I mean, I liked him coming out of college on the field, but he's not trending up. And yeah, I mean, there's issues with his leadership. He was the guy that was eating the W. If you guys
oh my God, it was
in
good.
the huddle.
I saw the video that.
And the veterans are standing around him going, "What the hell is this guy doing?"
Yeah, that was the greatest thing.
So this is another episode of athletes behaving badly. Winston has sort of taken ownership of it. He's gotten about 75% of the way there. He's clearly not. The best thing for him is just take his medicine and not fight it and be done with it.
Probably.
That's what he needs to do, and that sounds like what he is going to do since he publicly apologized.
Well, and in his apology, they've said he's stopped drinking now for the last year. So
yeah, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, right. I want to read one quote about it real quick from a guy we've had on our show a couple times, Steve, and you and I both love. Ernest Biner said, "Does his lack of control off the field somehow is that related to his lack of control on the field? And how and why have the Bucs basically not supported his growth? I think those are good questions to kind of be looking at."
I think, generally speaking, if the world paid more attention to Ernest Biner, the world would be a better world.
Yeah. I'll third
love
that.
Ernest Biner. He's one of the Hogstie's greatest all-time greatest guests.
Right.
And he has a ton of good insights.
Yeah.
We need to get him on the Hogstie again, Alex.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know me. I've said before, I would put him on every week.
Yeah, we need to have him be a permanent member.
Well, and at least for the time of the suspension, I would say maybe longer, depending on how things break out. What we do know is that Ryan Fitzpatrick will be yet again a starting quarterback in the NFL.
He's got to be, 50 years old now.
The suspension isn't going to be longer.
No, I'm saying, but that doesn't mean he's going to get his job back.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, of course, Ryan Fitzpatrick is not going to take anybody's job.
No, not at this point.
No. I mean, he might get his job back this year, but long-term future, are the Bucs going to cut ties? I mean, it's trending that way for sure.
One job Ryan Fitzpatrick could always take, beard grooming expert.
That is kind of him, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's got just a brutal beard, just brutal. I mean, it makes Chris look like he has no beard.
Yeah, that's right. That's a very good, fair point, especially after I recently cut it. All right, so we're gonna move on. I think that we've tapped this subject dry. I'm sure there'll be some updates as the NFL season screams towards us. Our next topic, we're gonna move to basketball. Actually, although some different takes on basketball. Our next two topics. We're heading into the NBA's offseason, which most NBA watchers and fans will concede is more exciting than the NBA's regular season, except for maybe the finals, and then judging on this year's finals, maybe even that. We've got a star system and a lot of player freedom where what's happening is players basically arrange their own teams, and for reasons that are very understood, wanting to be in a big market, wanting to play with talented peers, you essentially, the result is you have really only 6 to 7 markets in the NBA that can legitimately compete. Occasionally, and you're talking about places like Miami or San Antonio, who will be good for a while, but they have a hard time keeping these stars together. So they might spike up for a time, but they don't stay in the echelon of your Boston's.
San Antonio's a terrible example of that, by the way.
Well, no, because
they have been good. They've been good for 15 years.
Right, but going forward, that's also an older version of the NBA.
It's going to collapse, yeah.
And right now, they're one of the centers of this sort of changing landscape. With losing their star.
I think the NBA is interesting because it's a player-driven league, where in a star-driven league, where the NFL is really a team-driven league and an ownership-driven league. And Major League Baseball is a star-driven league to a certain extent, but there's a whole bunch of other issues. There's a big minor league system, everything else. But the NBA, LeBron James is the GM of the Cleveland Cavaliers, right?
Or whatever team he ends up being on, yes.
Yeah, or whatever he team ends up being on. That's just not the case in football. In no way, shape, or form is that the case. Nobody cares what the running back thinks on any team for any reason. But in the NBA, I think you're right in saying, Chris, that there's 6 or 7 markets. There's LA, Miami, New York, Chicago.
Boston.
What am I missing?
Boston, yeah.
But other than that, like the Minnesota Timberwolves are not going to build a Big Three dynasty. In no way, shape, or fashion is that ever going to happen. I don't care how much cap space they have. I don't care what presentation they have. You're not going to have that.
They may draft well.
Yeah, they may draft well and build a good team, but they're not going to draw LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George to Minnesota.
In fact, what proves this case to me is that you have the LA Clippers as a legitimate destination for no other reason than that they're in the city of Los Angeles. History, talent, no other reason would any player go there. But they're in everyone's short list, especially when it can be like LeBron or Durant or one of these guys getting 2 stars to go with them. The only reason is because it's in Los Angeles. So the fact that is on the short list of everyone's teams to build the next, hat trick of all-stars on, to me, proves the case.
Right. I mean, if anything, Cleveland having been one of the dominant teams was kind of just the anomaly of LeBron being there, right? I mean,
he's a hometown boy.
In a normal circumstance, Cleveland's going to be in that second, third tier with your Milwaukee. No one wants to live in Cleveland. I mean, it's a terrible place for that in terms of drawing
players. Right. It's just an anomaly of LeBron James's birthplace.
Right.
And they still couldn't get 2 other legitimate year in, year out all-stars.
Half a legitimate star, right?
I mean, Kevin Love is not going to bring your team to the finals.
No.
He's a good player.
He's not Paul George, Kevin Durant.
No.
Well, think about this. I mean, they drafted Kyrie Irving, and they brought LeBron James to Kyrie Irving, and they still couldn't keep Kyrie.
Right.
He still wanted to run out. I think the business and sports, aspect of this is truly the fact that this is a player-controlled thing. There's no other sport anywhere, to include Major League Baseball, maybe especially in baseball, where the players can dream up their own team. I swear, it's like, picking teams in the driveway when you're playing basketball with your friends.
It really
That's
is.
kind of what's going on here. I mean, the news broke last week, again, this week for us, last week for you, that LeBron was apparently texting Kevin Durant, seeing if Durant wanted to join up with him.
Right.
I think it's a bit out of control. I don't know how much I like that. I don't know how much that really is good for the NBA as a whole, as a league, because as Chris points out, what hope does Milwaukee and Minnesota have?
Right.
None. Not one thing. The NFL, that's a different story. The Vikings can be good. Mm-hmm. They're in a crappy location. They can be good. The Cleveland Browns, if the cloud of suck ever leaves the city, can be good.
Right.
It doesn't matter where they are. That's just flat out not impossible in the NBA.
I'd even argue your Detroits, your Philadelphias, your Miamis have a hard time competing. Not even, at that level of city and market.
Well, Miami, they had a good couple of years there with their big three. I'll tell you, the one thing that shocked me, thinking about it, how has New York never quite gotten any of that?
That's because New York has had incompetent leadership.
Yeah, their ownership is in anybody's top 5 worst owners in professional
James
sports.
Dolan is an awful owner, and he's brought, not only is he an awful owner, he's brought in horrible GMs. He's had Isaiah Thomas, who proved to be a disaster, and as much as I love Phil Jackson for bringing 5 titles to my Lakers as a coach, he's proved to be even worse than Isaiah Thomas as a GM.
Sure.
They have shot themselves in the foot with a bazooka repeatedly for decades.
It's just, in an era where you would think that 2 or 3 big names would really just want to be in that market, just for the revenue of being a big name.
If they had even an average leadership of even average competence, that would happen. But it's as long as James Dolan is alive and breathing on the planet, the next Stephen A. Smith is going to continue to lose his mind every year.
Yeah, they're the negative corollary that proves the rule.
No, it's like they are so awful that even despite being in New York, they can screw it up.
Yeah, and they do the same thing with the Rangers, by the way. It's the same ownership group. You can make the exact same critique, around the Rangers. So there's even like a larger corpus of evidence.
But at least the Rangers get in the playoffs pretty often.
Yeah, but they don't do much, and they didn't this year.
No.
But the big question really here is, I think, is this something that needs to change? If you're an NBA owner, do you want to take more control of your league and not let these players do this? I would irritate me just from an ego perspective because I have a massive ego. And if I was the owner of a team, it would really freaking irritate me if I have LeBron James and Kevin Durant texting about coming to my team and taking over. I
agree, but I don't see how you could do to change it.
Part of this is due to the fact that if just the physical presentation of the NBA game lends itself to this, because the players aren't wearing helmets.
Right.
If you're in the arena, you can sit 3 feet from the bench.
Right. It's always been about the big personalities.
It's always been about the big personalities, and it's always the players are well known. There's fewer players on the court, and there's fewer players in the league, and so you tend to get to know them better.
Right.
And that's just not what football is. There's 53 players on a team. They're all wearing helmets. You wouldn't recognize them if they walked in your kitchen. You probably wouldn't recognize 90% of them.
Same with baseball. Same with hockey.
Yeah, exactly. Baseball a little bit less, but they're still wearing helmets and hats. And they're 400 feet in the outfield. Yeah, and they're 400 feet in the outfield, and they're constantly pulling people up from AAA Tulsa or whatever. Basketball is uniquely set up to be a star-driven league, but at the same time, it's good for some and not good for others. And so if the league wanted to be healthy as a whole, it would make it much harder for these players to pull these shenanigans off. They've tried. The NBA has changed their free agency rules to allow teams that hold the players' rights to offer more money than other teams can.
Yeah, the Larry Bird exemption is not working anymore.
No.
Not really. Well, in like Paul George is one of the major players right now, and he's in this situation. You know, who are they? The
Pacers.
Help me. The Thunder. Oklahoma City Thunder can offer more money. You know, and but it doesn't seem to matter. And Kawhi Leonard, who is another subject of all these rumors, he's a subject of trade rumors, but he's trying to force his way out of San Antonio into LA, as Chris said. Kawhi has come out and flat out said, I don't care about the money.
Right.
I mean, and when you have that problem, I mean, you know, what can San Antonio do to keep him?
Nothing. And you know, right. I that's what I'm saying. I don't know what kind of rules you could make that would change this at this point.
Short of getting rid of free agency, and nobody wants that.
No,
you know.
That would be absurd.
It's I mean, I see it from both sides because I think part of the appeal of the NBA is the stars. You know, I mean, you want to see Magic Johnson from back in the day, LeBron James. The fans want to see that, you know, because I think NBA players are, generally speaking, the most physically awe-inspiring in what they do, probably of any sport. You know, it's pretty incredible to see a dude who's 6'3" jump, you know, 10 to a 10-foot hoop and spin around and dunk a ball. And, you know, I think you can more easily wow the casual fan in basketball than in another sport.
Yeah, and you add your point around there's no equipment, you know, covering up various parts of the face, body, whatnot. They're the most superhero-like pro athlete.
I mean, the only thing a GM has any control over, thinking about this, is making your city, or not your city, but your team, such a sweetheart destination that players will want to come. Taking the Milwaukee thing, for example, build the best facilities, do everything you can to attract those guys to come there. Like, that's all you can do. That's the only hope you have.
See, I think it matters a lot less for basketball, though, because these players don't train. Unlike football, which is stuck,
right,
you know, in the cities for half the offseason from OTAs and everything. And baseball is they go to spring training and they're in Arizona or Florida.
Right.
These basketball players train wherever they feel like, and they go to the big cities. They go to most of them go to Los Angeles. Some of them go to Houston, because Houston's a big NBA city, and they go to a couple other places. But they all train together.
Right.
You know, and so it's a little. I mean, I think that's less of a factor to these NBA teams. You know, like the Lakers have had a horrible training facility for years. They just opened a new one this past year. And did it matter a single bit? No, not at all. Zero. You know.
I mean, I'm just trying to think, like, what else could you do as an owner in the current situation?
I mean, you're locked. The NBA has what's known as a soft cap.
Right.
You know, for those who. Yeah, you know, but they make the luxury tax so onerous, and the situation where you can go over the luxury cap are very limited, and so it's very difficult for NBA teams to just offer more money. They really can't,
right,
unless it's their own free agent. So there's not that incentive. Baseball is a lot easier. There is a luxury tax, but you can go over it whenever you feel like.
Right.
And so the Yankees can spend whatever they want, whereas the Knicks really can't do that.
Right. And
you know,
and I realize that, and there's also the fact that you got, you know, B-level players getting that max contract all the time now in the NBA, which makes it even more complicated.
It's because they have to spend the money.
Right.
You know, that's part of it is, you know, there's a floor. They can't just have a $20 million payroll. They actually have to hit a floor.
Right. Well, and isn't that every league now? Except for, I don't know if baseball has a floor, but...
No, baseball doesn't have a floor. I mean, part of the issue in baseball right now is Chris's, you know, man lover, Derek Jeter, owns the Marlins, and he's been, you know, systematically destroying every remnant of that was the Florida Marlins.
Like $6 million or something ridiculous.
It's like $6. Yeah, it's like $6. They can buy a cheeseburger at McDonald's for the amount they're spending on the team.
Right.
And so there's no floor, but the NFL has a floor, and yes, the NBA, you have to spend a certain amount of money.
Okay.
So,
I didn't realize the NBA had a floor now.
I think I'm almost 100% positive it does.
Okay.
The only way that a mid-market team is going to succeed is if they get lightning in a bottle with a player that other
coach,
kind of like 1B level all-stars are going to want to rally around because they think there's a ticket. So you look at that's the positive flip of a place like the Milwaukee Bucks with that Greek kid. You know, if he turns into the superstar that it looks like he can be, and
the Greek Freak.
What? Yeah, the Greek Freak, right? And he could draw a couple 1B type of all-stars because they figured they could make a run for a couple years. And that,
Or those 1B All-Stars should say, hey, come to L.A., and the Greek Freak might say, hey, that sounds a lot more interesting than being up here in cold Milwaukee.
yeah, so far he's actually...
You got to get a guy to fall in love with your team. That's the only way you can do it.
Well, that's actually interesting. Now, saying something now is not saying something later, especially when he hits free agency. But he's talking a good game.
Yeah. The thought went completely out of my head. I had some brilliant point to make, and it's just gone.
That's right.
You know, that happens.
Wasn't
This
that
happens
brilliant?
when you do a live show. It was everything I say is brilliant. Come on. When you're doing a live show like this happens. This is not scripted, people. I can't remember what I was going to say.
Well, I think my boyfriend Derek Jeter would tell us it's time to move on.
When the thought completely loses you, it means it's time to move on.
Our final topic is staying in the world of basketball, but a much different model and a much different league. And, you know, basketball is insanely popular, and maybe it's one of those leagues that you could see some kind of insurgent threats from over the years. And that is the three-man league. Alex, why don't you give us a quick intro to this topic?
Well, first of all, it's the Big Three.
Big Three.
Let's get the name right.
Big Three League started by Ice-T or Ice Cube?
No, Ice Cube.
Ice Cube.
Get your rappers named after
Yes,
drinks.
well, you got to remember, I grew up in
Straight.
that era when we had Ice-T, Ice Cube, Vanilla Ice, and I was like a little kid, so I mixed them all up. So,
Yes.
you know, how I mixed
Ice
up
Cube
Vanilla Ice with
is-
either of them, I don't know. But
Ice Cube of NWA fame is the owner of the Big Three.
right,
League.
Ice Cube owns the Big Three League. Started it, what was it, a year ago now? This is their second season they just came up with. It's 8 teams of 3 players, or 3 players at a time, 6 players on each roster. And it's a lot of former greats. I'll give you some names of some guys who are joined the league this year. Andre Stoudemire, Metta World Peace, Carlos Boozer. It's guys like that. Guys who were done in the
Paul Perkins is in there. Big Baby Davis is in there.
Yeah.
I love Big
Iverson
Baby.
was a player coach last year. I don't know if he's doing that again this year.
Iverson got in a bunch of trouble because he basically blew off half the season.
Oh, did he? I didn't
yeah,
know that.
it was a big scandal.
That sounds like very
You know.
Iverson-ish, doesn't it?
It is, yeah.
Games. We're talking about games.
Yeah. So here's the deal. These are all ex-NBA guys kind of making that second run. It's the senior tour of the NBA. Half court, 3-on-3, first to 50 wins.
I like that. It's the senior tour. What's interesting to me is their business model, how they're selling these games, because
it's very unique.
it's a traveling roadshow.
Right.
It is. It's.
Well,
I'll give Chris the credit for. I'll give Chris the credit for this. He said it off the air. It's NASCAR.
Yeah.
It's every week they're going to a different city. That's very interesting because I don't know how much traction a Big Three team could really get if you parked 3 guys with 2 backups in Chicago,
Right.
or whatever. It's less interesting, especially a bunch of old, washed-up NBA players. It's a lot less interesting than if you tour it around every weekend. They play on Friday nights.
Right.
On weekends. It's either Friday or Saturday. And then the next week they're in another city. I think it's very interesting way to go because
what cities they're doing this year. I didn't put down the dates, but it's Houston, Chicago, Oakland, Detroit, Miami, Toronto, Boston, Atlanta, Dallas, New York. So 10 games for the season, and then they have a championship. Best 2 teams play head to head. And I think Vegas last year, maybe this year too.
Yeah, I mean Iverson. Ice Cube's a smart guy.
Yeah.
He's got a really interesting business model with this. And he's got a lot of major backers behind it.
Right. Fox Sports 1 TV deal.
Yeah, and these a part of the reason why he's able to get all these big players is there's a synergy between the rap world, the hip hop world, and basketball.
Right.
And so he knows a lot of these guys personally already, and I'm sure when he got the league kind of off the ground, it was him on a phone calling a lot of these guys, most likely. But it may actually work. I'm usually skeptical of these little leagues. As Alex knows, I've repeatedly bashed them on the Hogsty.
Yeah.
But this is one that kind of, it seems like he may actually pull it off just because it's so different.
I think it's different, but at the same time, anyone who's played basketball has played some 3-on-3 pickup half-court basketball in their life. We've all done it. Even short, out-of-shape guys like all of us, we've all been there. I think it works well, and, they only pay about $100,000 a player. I think that's kind of what the salary structure is. Everyone gets $100K. That's not a lot of money if you're thinking about how these leagues work.
They're more, but they're more after the glory than the money.
Right.
These are guys who are all
some
rich.
of them, yeah, some like the big names who have all the money, they don't care. But if you look at some of the guys
Bryant
who are
is not in the
backups,
Big Three league.
it's guys
Yeah.
who are like career NBA backups too.
That's a good point. I mean, Kobe Bryant is not a player in the Big
No,
Three league,
although,
and he's not going to be.
An article I read on it, that's his dream. That's Ice Cube's dream, is to get Kobe to play.
I know. Yeah, he's tried.
There's a lot of interesting things. Well, first of all, I think this is totally appropriate that when Alex guest spots on It's Just Business, we talk, circus leagues, Mr. begging people to come to arena football games on social media.
He's done it on the Hogsty show at least 3 or 4 times.
Anyone who will listen. But I actually agree with Steve. This is super interesting. So maybe, and here are a couple of the differentiators. One, barnstorming sports entertainment has a long tradition in the United States. I mean, that's the early days of baseball. Lots of even the Harlem Globetrotters type of, and not a real competition, but still it was barnstorming. So I think and people love regional stuff, and stuff like NASCAR and even pro wrestling has been kind of, using, and even like the dirtier car leagues, your monster trucks and your smash 'em ups have been doing that kind of barnstorming model for a long time. So that resonates, I think, with Americans in all kinds of different regions. Also, it's a different game. You can talk to me about the nuance of Arena Football League, but it's basically football. Any of these like startups are going to be basically football. 3-on-3 basketball, half court, is a radically different product, and that's a big differentiator. It doesn't feel as much like the light beer version of the major sport.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. It's a very good point you make about the barnstorming. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, there is a long history going back 100 years, on
Even
that.
more,
So, yeah, that's...
Especially in baseball, those traveling baseball teams that used to be in the Midwest.
Yeah, you're right.
Negro leagues.
Now, let's contrast that. And we haven't brought him up in a long time, but it's time. I think Chris knows where I'm going with this, probably. LeVar Ball, friend of the show. LeVar Ball has started a league of his own. And I can't remember I didn't plan on talking about this. I can't remember the name of it. It's something like the Big Baller League, but that's not that. But it's something
close enough.
Big Baller related. Yeah. And this league is totally different. This league is focused on high school kids who don't want to go to college. And it is a more traditional league. It's 5 players on the court. These teams are supposed to be parked, in cities, and it's supposed to be an alternative to going to college. Well, this league has had the opposite level of success as had the Big Three. The LeVar Ball League just started out this year, and they had they played their first week into an empty arena.
Right.
And granted, it's not the big names; it's kids nobody's heard of, but still, it's just probably not going to work because it's the same old business models we've seen a million times.
And by the way, I'm Googling it right now to figure out what the name is. But
good.
Yeah. When I find it, I'll let you know.
Okay. Well, yeah. So we'll keep talking until Alex, works this out. I mean, in the LeVar Ball League was started basically with the fact that, because he sort of ruined his 2 younger kids' basketball careers, and so he had to have something to do with them. So he started a league.
But the Big Three Association is what it called it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. It's sponsored by Big Baller brand.
Right.
That's what it is.
Playing in empty stadiums.
Yeah, not stadiums. Not even stadiums.
Right.
Small arenas.
Right.
And, they don't have a TV contract. They're on, Facebook, I think. Facebook Live,
Right.
I think,
They're
is
playing in
broadcasting.
Ontario and places like that, too.
Yeah. The Big Three, though, they're barnstorming. They've got big names.
Right.
That all of us know. Let's face it, the guy who runs it is very charismatic. Who doesn't like Ice Cube?
Right.
Even if you're not a rap fan, everybody likes Ice Cube, right?
Yeah, he's just got that $1 million smile is what it is.
Yeah, you like the movie Friday, you like 21 Jump Street, plenty of things.
Yeah, all those things. And so I think it really has a chance to succeed in a way that LeVar Ball's league certainly doesn't. And a lot of these, Alex's best thing, the Arena Football League, is down to 4 teams.
It's been around 31 years. I don't know how.
So it's because they're keeping it together with Scotch tape. It's the only way to explain
it's fair.
They must be driving them. They must be driving, making these kids, these guys drive to, opposing cities in their own cars or something.
Yeah, probably about that.
There's also with the Ice Cube League, there's also a sense of fun, right? Like there's a sense of these you can ham it up a little bit more in 3-on-3. You have aging stars. They all have personalities. You don't have to really play like team defense and these kind of things, so you can kind of showboat. And there's also, if you're going to be that kind of league, you got to play up those kind of aspects.
They play up a little bit of rivalry between the teams. And, it's all for show, obviously, because they're all traveling together from city to city, So what
did you guys see this video that came out this past week?
No.
About Michael Rappaport happened to be on the flight with the Big Three League on, I don't know why he was, on one of their barnstorming, trips last week. And they had a guy on the flight try to open the door in mid-flight, and Rappaport stopped the disaster from happening in front of all these basketball players. Like Baron Davis was on this flight, and Big Baby Davis, and all these Big Three guys. And of all people, the obnoxious, grating Michael Rappaport saved the airplane.
Huh.
Everyone can be a hero, Steve.
Yeah, even Michael Rappaport, who's just the most anti-hero guy I know.
Right. No, I think the concept of the league, though, I like it. I hope it works out because
it is working so far.
It's working so far. You know what? We were talking about it in the last thing. Basketball's all about the big personalities. This just allows that to keep going for some of these guys a little longer.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point earlier, Alex, which is maybe I can't remember which one you made it, but 3-on-3 basketball is different than the 5-on-5, and it presents the game in a different way, and I think people can relate to it more. Because you're right, Alex, you said this. I mean, we've all played 3-on-3 half-court basketball.
Right.
We all haven't played 5-court series basketball.
No.
This is another game.
I'm 5'10". I was not on the high school basketball team.
No, if you're watching an NBA game or even a Division I college basketball game and you see some guy, playing an ISO game the whole time, you're like, come on, this is horrible. It's not team basketball. But, you watch 3-on-3, the whole point is ISO play, right? So It's a much different thing.
Right.
It's just something you can see yourself doing. I can't see myself playing on the Lakers.
No.
I can see myself playing 3-on-3.
No. Now, apparently they do have a 4-point shot in there. That I haven't checked out enough games to really notice that, but that's a thing.
The Globetrotters do that too.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it just makes it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
And theoretically, I guess you could have a 5-point shot if you get fouled.
Sure. Put it all the way in the back.
Make him shoot from the other free throw line, maybe.
And there are a lot of traditions, especially in cities, of the kind of more not professional by any stretch, but like the 3-man leagues and audiences.
Well, you have the whole Rucker Park situation in L.A. or in New York, and in L.A. they have a similar thing to Rucker Park. I can't remember what it's called, but there's a long history of summer ball with these guys who are very talented basketball players. They're just not pros.
Right.
So it really is just the kind of star version of that.
So I think this is going to, or it already went through Houston, and it's coming through New York, I think. Would you guys go?
I would go.
Now I do kind of want to go.
Because, you're going to watch 4 games. That's the nice thing about it, too. You go...
Yeah, it sounds interesting.
Yeah, there's like an undercard kind of thing.
Right. I wouldn't go to LeVar Ball's thing, and it's not because LeVar's an obnoxious moron.
I would do it
because
for
it doesn't
reason.
really... Well, yeah, because you never know. If it doesn't sound interesting.
No.
Unless you're really a diehard basketball nut.
Right.
You don't have to be a diehard basketball nut to enjoy a Big Three evening with the Big Three.
No, I'd rather go watch, if it was the LeVar Ball type deal, I'd rather go watch the D League, in the NBA.
Yeah, or go watch single A baseball where at least they know how to throw a good time, the
I love
mustard races and whatnot.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Minor league baseball.
Yeah. That's something we need to tackle on a future show.
Yeah. I was just at Coney Island Cyclones game a couple weeks ago. Good time.
Very good. So that's the Big Three, people.
All right, Big Three. So let us know. Tweet at us if you have A, been, B, would want to go, or C, don't care and you just want to yell at us. We need more people yelling at us, quite frankly. We feel unloved on Twitter when we don't have hate tweets.
Because we get a lot of hate tweets on the other show, and so we could use a few.
Right,
It's just
mix it up, people. Come on. All right, so, Alex, where can they hate tweet you?
They know where they can hate tweet me. I'm on the Hogside blog all the time anyway. So if you really want to hate tweet me, just go over there and hate tweet me. On Twitter, occasionally get a hate tweet. Mostly it's just, people, liking things that I yell at Grant and Danny.
They're easy to yell at. I mean, you can't hate tweet me individually, but you can hate tweet me at the Hogsty.
And you can hate tweet me at ChrisLarry33. And one challenge to any of the Hogsty website commenters: stay on topic on this thread for at least 4 comments.
I'll never do it.
I'm putting the over-under on staying on topic 5 comments.
They will never
5?
do it.
I know. It's a solid under bet.
Hey, you keep putting up 1,000 comments a day for us, you're welcome to it. You're welcome to have that.
All right. Make that advertising dollars, people. All right. That brings us to the end of another It's Just Business. We will see you in 2 weeks. Rich will probably be back unless he's continuing to globetrot from USA Today's best beaches in the world list. We will see him back. Alex, thanks as always. It's always enjoyable to have you on.
No problem. Love to come on.
And listen to the Hogsty. When's the next Hogsty dropping?
Next Hogsty's dropping it drops on every Monday.
Yeah, we drop it Monday, so it'll drop the day before this drops.
Just
Listen
if
to
it's a Monday,
yesterday's.
look for a new Hogstay.
Yes.
And during the season, we do it twice.
And what's the position breakdown this week?
Inside linebackers, I think. Yeah.
Inside
That's right.
linebackers,
The poll.
Right. People got mad about the poll.
Yeah, they really did. We'll save that for the Hogstay.
All right. Well, there's still
We
time.
took a lot of flack for
There's
the
still
poll.
time to go and fight about that. And so thank you, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.